views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hey there, welcome to the Bronx Buzz. As you know, BronxNet's program where we talk to writers and editors, and journalists, filmmakers, photographers, music historians, and I say that advisedly because that's what we're going to do in the second part of our show. And we are really thrilled to go up to Albany with a flip of a switch and say good evening to our buddy Zach Williams, who is the senior state politics reporter for City and State New York. Nice to see you, Zach.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so thrilled that you cleared out the state capitol so we could do this interview. I greatly appreciate it. Anyway, I do want to tell people this has been a lot of people have texted me and emailed and said, hey, Gary, we're going to talk about redistricting on the show. And it's a very complicated issue, but it's a very important one because now you're going to have different representation in some cases in the Bronx. And of course, there's all kinds of political discussions going on about what happened. So before we get into these districts that I can't deny made me laugh this morning because Zach described the 16th congressional district to be a bulging bearded head. Let's talk about the process. Was not your usual, hey, let's get together and make some districts. It really went through a couple of generations, didn't it?
Call it politics, Gary. What can I say? Let me just apologize. Heads up. I'm kneeling right here in the state capitol, so if I wiggle around, sorry to the viewers. I'll try to keep you from getting seasick here. But yes, the redistricting process, that's every 10 years, they redraw the maps for state Senate, Assembly, and Congress. And I think what you've seen this year is a well-intentioned effort to do this in a more fair way than in the past through what's called an independent redistricting commission. Just fell flat on its face. You know, its members were appointed by Republicans and Democrats, and unfortunately they deadlocked on reaching a coherent plan for redrawing the maps, leaving it to state lawmakers. And in Albany, where Democrats control everything, that means there was no shortage of people looking to take full partisan advantage of the process. And what that means for people in the Bronx, I think by and large, is especially dramatic on the congressional map. You know, you have like freshman incumbent Jamal Bowman, who currently represents a pretty significant portion of the Bronx. His district is being pushed northward into past Westchester into Putnam County. So that means he's going to be representing a lot fewer Bronxites and more suburban voters, which really could challenge him at the polls. He's been one of the most progressive members of the House, especially in the state delegation. And now he's really got to watch his right flank where a more moderate Democrat could emerge in the upcoming primary. I think we're seeing something that was...
So I was going to say that there are so many of these, and we'll break down the districts. I wanted to go back to the process and something that you had said about so Democrats took full advantage, and we can examine that. But the fact is, it was the Republicans, when they controlled the state legislature, who created this system. And so, you know, it's almost like the whole dialogue about the filibuster said, you know, you better watch what you might regret what you ultimately put out. And now the Republicans are saying it's unfair. But, you know, putting the thing or potentially putting it in the hands of the state legislature is what they kind of wanted when they were in charge, right? I mean, let's be honest.
Well, it's kind of funny how political parties say different things in different states when they're in different situations. And the Republicans, who used to have control of the state Senate, you know, had a big role in redistricting 10 years ago. They don't have that anymore. Now the Democrats have a supermajority in both chambers of the state legislature. So what you see now is a lot of Republicans crying foul on a redistricting process that they themselves had a big role in creating. That is this independent redistricting commission that really is kind of named mistakenly. It's really a bipartisan redistricting commission. commissioners, half appointed by Democrats, half by Republicans. And if they couldn't reach a deal, then the state constitutional amendment in 2014 says that the state legislature has to step up, draw the maps themselves. And if they get approved by 2/3 of both chambers, they can stand. And that's exactly what happened.
So let's get back to Jamal Bowman's district. I know I'm going to read the quote again, bulging bearded head, as it was created, as it was crafted. So if Rebecca can pull that up, the 16th congressional district, we can look at it. That's a fascinating thing. And you say, well, Democrats created it. It sounds or looks to me like moderate Democrats created it, because obviously Jamal Bowman is a left-wing politician, so to speak. I saw an article somewhere where he said, don't call me progressive, okay. But now, as you said, he's up there in Somers and Yorktown, all the way up to Putnam Valley. It starts to get red up there, right?
Well, it's he has not always been the greatest ally of the party establishment. So it's easy to look for conspiracies or backroom deals. Who knows? They haven't told me what's going on, the people that do these maps. We only know what people say in public. But that said, I think there is an interesting phenomenon where in redistricting in New York, Democrats have chosen to really try to create as many competitive districts as possible, minimizing the safe Republican districts, but also leaving some of their incumbents vulnerable in either a primary or general election. So you have Jamal Bowman, whose district used to be, or is currently very left-leaning, becoming a little bit more moderate through redistricting. But we're also seeing current Republican-held seats that are going from pretty right-leaning to very competitive for the Democrats in the 2022 cycle. So I doubt Jamal Bowman earned himself many favors from the party establishment in redistricting, but there's a grander strategy at play that is all about Democrats trying to maximize their chances of keeping control of the U.S. House in these midterm elections.
And if you examine the way you just described it, you could interpret that on some levels as saying, well, the Democrats, they were balanced in a way. In other words, they took a left-handed politician and kind of nudged him a little bit to the right. I want to talk about the Richie Torres district, which is also a fascinating thing. Of course, historically, Jose Serrano held that seat in the 15th, and it was a South Bronx seat. It was, and again, Rebecca, if you could put that 15th up there, it was the poorest congressional district in the nation. Now, as you can see, it's kind of got a claw hook. I'm waiting to hear how Zach decides to interpret that. But it's got a claw.
Well, that's
that goes up to Riverdale.
That's an interesting one. And I was wondering the same thing itself. We go from this district that's very compact in the South Bronx, almost circular, at least as far as congressional districts go. And now it's got all this part of Riverdale. And you got to keep in mind that Richie Torres has been very pro-Israel. And there's a very significant Jewish constituency in the Northwest Bronx. That might have been on the mind of some map makers when they thought, where are we going to add a little bit of space to Richie Torres's current district? You got to remember, we're going from 27 to 26 congressional districts following the U.S. Census. So everyone's district has to take a little bit more land. And in the case of, Richie Torres's district, they added an area that just so happens to have predominance of voters that might just like his stance on Israel.
The concern that I've heard from many different corners of the South Bronx is now we won't get the attention that we need. Now we won't get the resources that we need for things like housing and food justice and all these other issues that they fight for all the time, because they're going to say, hey, look at the economy or look at the income level. It's balanced out by the richest, frankly, the wealthiest people in the borough of the Bronx.
Well, keep in mind, there are some legal challenges against both the legislative and the congressional maps. And one of the best ways to challenge a redistricting map is under the Voting Rights Act from 1965, I believe, which really protects what are called minority majority districts. Under the Voting Rights Act, if you have a district that's currently, say, predominantly African American or predominantly Jewish or predominantly any type of demographic where this represents a particular opportunity for them to elect one of their own to Congress, then depriving of them of that can be legal grounds for actually challenging a congressional map. And that's one reason why Jerry Nadler's district is so crazy, weaving together all these Jewish communities in Brooklyn and Manhattan.
The first one I remember in the Bronx was when Guy Villela was at the 34th Senatorial District, and they said it looked like a lobster, the way it went from the East Bronx skipped over the Central Bronx. Well, let's see. Of course, getting people what they're due and making them have to sue for it is probably not the best thing. The last one I want to look at is the one that's the third a congressional district, and Senator Alessandra Biaggi has already said she wants to run. What I find so disturbing is that all Bronx neighborhoods are important, but all those neighborhoods in the East Bronx and City Island and Pelham Bay and Throgs Neck, those are all going to be a minor part of the district, and Long Island, which is going to make enough noise, is going to be the bulk of it. I feel like people in the East Bronx are, when it comes time to get shoreline support or things like that to protect against environmental disasters, I'm concerned. Let's put it as a Bronx site.
That's a really interesting one. Again, congressional districts, have to be centered on what are called communities of interest. Kind of like what I mentioned with minority-majority districts. In this case, with the current New York Congressional District 3, currently represented by Tom Suozzi, who's running for governor and is not running for re-election, what they're doing is taking a congressional district that's almost all in Nassau, and Suffolk County has a little bit of Queens too. And they're actually linking that with the waterfront of the East Bronx and parts of Westchester, claiming that this will be a kind of a Long Island Sound district. Now, Biaggi, who's a state senator in the Bronx and Westchester right now, just so happens to live within this district, which gives her a little bit of an extra boost in running for it. Keep in mind, members of Congress, unlike members of the legislature, do not actually need to live in their districts.
We're going to conclude this now. I think we need to do. Having said that, the Republicans are challenging this in the courts. All the analysis seems to be that it won't work, but I mean, who knows? I guess that would be the bottom line. So anyway, Zach Williams, he's the senior state reporter for City and State New York. This dialogue is going to go on, and we hope it's going to include you because you're the best. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and sorry again for bouncing all around up here in the state.
You're all right. You're all right. And let's thank our senators and assembly members for closing down the state senate so we could do this interview. We really appreciate it.
Anything for you guys.
Yeah, I'm sure. Anyway, say hello to all our buddies over there at City and State New York. What a great job you do. And we'll take a short break. When we come back, the world's great hip hop photographer, you know who I'm talking about, and his father will be joining us. Don't go away.
We know that people are dealing with the health crisis, but there's also a lot of food insecurity.
We're giving out healthy food options, and that's what's key here.
If you're a senior, you have a disability, they'll actually deliver meals to you.
The residents are anxious, they're worried, they're scared, they want to be tested.
When things were happening in our community, and we couldn't get the help.
There's almost a presumption of criminality that attaches to your skin color.
The site will prioritize those who are at highest risk in the population.
If you feel symptoms and you'd like to visit one of these COVID-19 testing sites here in the Bronx, you may call the State Health Department's hotline.
Important to note about this site is no reservations are needed. This is a walk-in clinic.
A lot of us are out of work and looking for something to do.
We have the machinery and the skills to make large scales of these masks and gowns.
Take care of your people. It's going to go way further than we actually can understand.
Right now, employees like myself are just adjusting to the new reality.
Reporting from BronxNet, this is Conzo Jr.
Okay, back with you on the Bronx Buzz. I am thrilled, beyond thrilled, to bring on the two guests. We had talked about that we were going to talk about the history of Latin and jazz music, and who better to do that with, I would say, the Conzo family. So let's start off and say good evening to my buddy Joe Conzo Jr. and my brand new friend Joe Conzo Sr. Nice to see both of you. Welcome to the Bronx Buzz. Joe Jr., let's just start with you since you're here. A check-in. You're one of I call you the hip hop photographer. You've been taking any pictures? You've been hanging out. What have you been doing? And Rebecca can show for people who don't know what we're really dealing with here. Let's just show a couple of your iconic photos.
Thank you.
So tell me what you've been working on. What's going on?
So, listen, I'm staying busy as much as I can in this pandemic. Being selective in what I'm shooting, but I'm still shooting and getting out and about when I can. There's a bunch of concerts coming up at Lehman Center, and I'm looking forward to shooting those.
Is Rebecca? Let's just show some of the old photos. There's Tito Puente, of course. Is the process of doing these, of taking these photos? There's Matt Dillon with Pops.
Yeah.
And is the process, and this, of course, is an iconic of Celia Cruz and Tito Puente, my goodness. And moving it up a little more modern, so to speak. And here is Nas and LL Cool J. Is the process of doing it, taking the pictures at concerts and of Bronx music any different than it was way back when?
Oh, it's changed a lot.
Really?
Back in, when I was the young teenager taking those iconic photographs, I was just a handful of people photographing what was going on. Now you have to fight and juggle with other photographers for.
And they don't even know who you are. That's not.
Listen, it is what it is.
I know, and you're a humble guy who has really archived some of the most important parts of our Bronx culture. I was vaguely aware, but somewhat unaware, that you got your artistic bent from your father. And so we'll say Joe Conzo Jr., Sr., nice to meet you. The foremost, let's introduce you formally, the foremost Latin music historian in the country, also a teacher, professor at Hostos Community College, author of the book about Tito Puente. He has also appeared in films, Carlito's Way with Al Pacino, Mambo Kings with Armando Sante. So nice to meet you. First of all, thank you for continuing to inspire your son, because we need his work. But talk to me a little bit about the history of Latin music and Latin jazz that you're beginning to teach, and that's why you're here, to invite people to come and learn. So tell me a little bit about that.
I think it's very, very important to our culture, which is the most important thing that is lacking throughout the Hispanic community. If you ask some of these kids today who Tito Puente was, they'll look at you. You have to refer Santana and say, you know Santana? Oh, yeah. And then when you say the tune, Oye Como Va, they say, oh, I know that tune. Then you got to tell them, Tito Puente was the composer.
That that it makes a lot of sense, and of course we talk about culture all the time and the importance of it and how rich we are in the Bronx. I'm going to ask you actually the same question in a way what I asked Joe Jr. Talk to me about past versus present. Is understanding, those roots. Tell us a little bit about what it was like, covering this stuff and following this stuff and living, Latin jazz all those years way back when in the Bronx.
Well, not only in the Bronx, but throughout New York City. You had the Palladium, which was notorious, known as the home of the mambo. You had the Hunts Point Palace in the Bronx. You had the Embassy Ballroom. Most important, you had the radio. The radio does not play this music anymore.
That's right.
You can take the subway and go to any club in the city of New York. The Bronx was notorious for a lot of clubs.
So when you do what you're about to do and teach, the history of Latin music and Latin jazz, do you find that modern students They're doing it, well, I need 3 credits, so I'm taking the class kind of thing? Or do they really embrace it and say, this is my culture, now I understand it? I mean, how does it
It
work?
varies. It
It
varies.
varies.
I got an older crowd, and as far as students are concerned, when I did it in person, the older folks would bring their children. Because of the pandemic, we're doing everything now on Zoom. You know, everything is
Right.
virtual. But what I love about the virtual is that I can get people, which I have, from Colombia, South America, from Peru, and Boston, Puerto Rico. So I get a bigger audience.
Right. And listen, I understand that as well, obviously, because of what we do. Sometimes I have to tell you, as much as I like the reach, I find it a little more challenging because it's not quite as easy to connect. So let's put up this.
Gary, let me just interject here.
Please do, of course.
This is, and Dad, correct me if I'm wrong. This is your 10th year?
10th year.
How long have you been teaching at Ostos?
Almost 15 years, 15 sessions.
You better get your math together, young man.
I don't know what the number is. XV1. How much is that? 16
16.
years. Right?
16 years.
All right, there you go. So it's the 16th year. So here it is. Now, and what do you do now? Do you, especially virtually, you show videos, you play music?
I show videos, and what I love is that we have a Q&A session, and they'll ask me, who is that musician? Who is that singer? And because you get them from the video. That's another thing. There's very few videos available. So I go into the books, and I have a vast library of videos. I'll show a video of Miguelito Valdez, and people will say, who's that? I said, well, that's the original Babalu, not Desi Arnaz. And
do you in Espanol? You and don't start talking Spanish, because my Spanish is unfortunately
no, I
not
talk
that
in
good.
Spanish when I have to. I speak in English. I teach in English, but I talk.
Okay.
I do both languages.
When you teach, what is the one thing that blows people's mind? Maybe aside from the fact that Oye Como Va really was Tito Puente.
I'll tell you one.
Go ahead, go for it.
I'll tell you one. Now, I'm known for my hip-hop photography. So my dad taught me something that I never knew.
There you go.
That Tito Puente, the king of Latin music, played on Sugar Hill Gang's first album. And I wish I would have sent you a picture of it, but if you look at the album cover, the Sugar Hill Gang's album cover, it says special appearance by Tito Puente.
And he played some rhythm track on there?
So he was a guest.
Sugar Hill Groove.
And he made a special appearance on hip hop's first album.
He was the first Latin music star to ever appear on a hip hop album.
So this brings up another thing, because we're talking about, kind of the merging of two Bronx cultures. Has the music changed? And certainly when you think about if it comes from the same people who invented hip hop, or some of the same people, is there a merging of it as you get to this day and age?
Listen, hip hop as a whole has, we made it to the Super Bowl last night.
That's right.
Super Bowl halftime. And, as much as you can applaud that, hip hop has traveled across the country, across the world. I'm happy to have seen and borne witness to it. But, hip hop takes from all genres of music.
And I'm going to go in the other direction, because a lot of times when I hear dance music and I hear club music, it has an absolute undercurrent of a Latin beat, and I see that all the time. So, Joe Sr., do you find that it's kind of energized or allow people to reinterpret Latin jazz a little bit?
Well, that's not Latin jazz. That's hip hop. But it does,
I'm trying, man. I'm trying.
It does have that under, the clave is ba, 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 ba. And that's 3 2 1 2 3 2 2 1 2.
Right.
You had that Santana when he did his fusion. He was one of the few people that started that.
That's right.
Then it went on and on and on. Tito was one of the few musicians in the world that could adjust to any type of rhythm. because he knew it. He knew how to adjust, and he was an iconic figure.
And
Plus,
he under he un-
percussionist.
he
And
yes, of course, and he understood all of the connectivities.
When they looked I was there when the Sugar Hill Gang, when they looked at this old man, they said, "Who's this guy?"
They said he could rock. Listen, before we run out of time, I want to talk about we have something coming up at not only the classes, which we'll put up before we end, but coming up at Lehman College that you're involved in. So why don't you talk about that?
Well,
Joe Sr.
I'm the host for Lehman College. It's March 5th, and those are the three sons of Tito Rodriguez, Machito, and Tito Puente Jr. They're going to play the music of their fathers.
Wow.
And I'm one of the few people alive on this planet that knew all three of them.
Knew them when they were this big, right?
I used to cross the street.
But you see, this to me is so rich and so healthy for the borough of the Bronx because we are, merging not only cultures but generations, showing continuity. I mean, this. I say this too.
Thing. And I agree with you, Gary. It's very important.
It's very important. Listen, let's just quickly put up the schedule of classes. How do people get in touch with you in order to participate in this really wonderful virtual series?
There's a Zoom link which I don't have in front of me.
All right.
It's on Facebook, and Hostos College has their own link.
Got it. Joe Jr., can you just articulate how people should find that link?
Just go to Hostos Community College, click
on Facebook or their website.
And click on events, and you can join the classes virtually.
And it's free, and it's from 11 to 1. And you can
on
join
Saturdays.
at 4 o'clock.
All right, we got to run. This is, for me, has been an absolute pleasure. Two of the great people of the Bronx, and they happen to be father and son, Joe Conzo Jr., Joe Conzo Sr. So thanks so much. I mean, it's just wonderful for everything all the time. And let's get everybody to sign up for the classes. Tell everybody about it. Onward and upward. So that'll do it for the Bronx Buzz. Thanks to our buddy Zach Williams from calling in from the state capitol, as a matter of fact. And then, of course, for these two guys who are just absolutely fantastic, energizing our culture, which is, of course, how we're going to save the Bronx. Do you ask me? I told you. We'll see you next week. Good night.